Hello, my name's Sarah Gray from Funky Fossil and I'm delighted to be the designer behind Papercraft Society Box number 52. The Papercraft Society Box that I've designed is packed full of stamps, stencils, dies, papers, ephemera, absolutely everything you're going to need to make some stunning projects. And of course it comes with an inspiration booklet too, so you've got lots of ideas to get you started as soon as you get it home. So today I'm going to share a video making a couple of quick cards with you, and I'll be doing a separate live where we'll explore the box in a little bit more detail. But first and foremost, let's have a look at what we're going to make in our projects today. So I've got a shaker card that we'll be making with a panel on the front, and then the second card, which I'm not really going to take you through in any detail, is one using the offcuts that we have created from the first project and simply using that with the pattern papers that come in the kit. So that's what we're going to do today. They're simple projects, and really the key is just to use your large die and the stencils along with the papers to create something really unusual and lovely to look at. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks very much for joining me. See you soon. Right, let's get started making a shaker panel card using the fantastic Funky Fossil Papercraft Society box. So on my desk in front of me, I've got the beautiful wallet that a lot of the contents come in, and all we're going to use for this particular project, don't you just love it when it unfolds and you've got all these gorgeous goodies to play with? What we're going to use for this particular project is the large love die. That's a great kind of card filler die. And we're going to use some of the fabulous papers that come with this kit. And we'll use I can't decide which yet, but we'll use one of these fabulous stencils that comes with the collection. So we're going to have the die, the stencils, some of these pattern papers. I think I'm going to go for this one, this kind of marbled one with the gold running through it and the touches of blue. And my plan would be to use, I think I've used it already, so we'll show you in a second, but the deep blue damask design that comes with this selection of papers too. In addition to these items that are obviously part of your box kit, you'll need some acetate, you'll obviously need a die cutting machine. We'll be using some inks for our stencils, and I think that'll be pretty much it. Because we're making a shaker card, and therefore we'll need something to shake in the aperture that we create. We will also use the fabulous kind of gold sequins that come in the kit too. So you've got those on hand, you'll have them ready to fill your aperture. So what we'll do, and I've already done a bit of die cutting ahead of time just to save you time watching me, is using our large love die. I've already die cut it out of the pink paper. How beautiful and delicate does that look? Now, of course, the fantastic thing about this die, I'm just looking for a piece of dark card that will enable me to show you. The fantastic thing about this die is, of course, it also cuts out the letters. So you've got kind of a variety of techniques and options in the ways that you use this die. You could obviously piece the exact letters back in, as I'm doing here. So these are the ones that came out of this particular cut. Or you could piece a contrasting paper into the apertures created by the letters. So we could use the dark blue that I'm going to show you in a second and create a contrasting sentiment. Or, because we're doing a shaker card, I'm going to do neither of those things and leave it all open. But of course, I've got these fantastic letters to use as a sentiment on another project. So there's lots you can do with this particular die, and it's a good size as well. So this is going to be the main focal point of our project today. So die cut it out of the light pink. I've also die cut it out of the beautiful blue damask paper that I couldn't find a second ago, and here it is. And I die cut it out of this too, so you can see I've got two contrasting sentiments there. Beautiful. I just love this colour combination of navy and blush. I just think it looks fabulous with the luxurious touches of gold. Now for this shaker card, I don't actually want this, so I'm going to put this to one side and use it on another project. The element that I was actually wanting was the aperture that's left in the paper after you've die cut the sentiment out of it. And this is going to be the base that we're going to piece the contrasting, I think that's the other way around, there we go, that we're going to put the contrasting love inside. So this is going to be the panel for our shaker card. So obviously I've got this base that I've cut this sentiment out of, and we need to attach some acetate to the back of it. So we're going to have a clear window that our shaker elements will be visible through. Now this looks like quite a milky coloured acetate. It's stamped by me, and the only reason it looks milky is because it has a protective cover on both sides. So I don't even know if I'm probably not on camera here, am I? I'm just going to use my pokey tool to remove that protective cover. And my eyesight's not as good as it should be, so I am going to go off camera a bit just so I can put it right up to my right up to my nose. So I love acetate like this, where you know you've already got that protection from a clear cover. So it's great for shaker cards because you want your acetate to be as clear and scratch free as possible. So if you can get one that's a nice heavyweight like this and has the protective coating on it, then you're going to do well. Just remember it's there, and remember to take it off before you actually start to stick things down. So that's the second bit of protective film. Did I get all of that? There's a bit there, isn't there? Let's get that too. There we go. So that's now crystal clear. And I left the protective film on because there are so many times I do demos, I have cut a piece of acetate in advance and then I cannot find it for love nor money. So at least having it a bit milky means I can actually see it on my see it on my craft desk. So I'm going to adhere the acetate to the back of the panel that we've used our love dye on. I'm using some tonic glue. Any glue that you have will do the job here. And I'm kind of taking the glue round close-ish to the aperture itself, because we don't want the we want the kind of acetate to be snug to the die cut shape. So you can see here where there are bits that kind of protrude in, I am wanting those to stick down. I don't want them to come loose because we want to piece the detailed die back in, and obviously it helps if the space it's being pieced into is solidly stuck down. But I've tried to keep it won't really matter on this project, but it's just one thing to bear in mind with your acetate. I've tried to keep the adhesive far enough away from the actual edge that we don't get bleed through showing on the front. So because we're piecing another die cut into this space, it wouldn't really make much difference this time out. But if you did want a large open aperture and you wanted it to remain nice and clear, sometimes you want to just try and avoid that glue seeping into the window you're creating. So there we go. I've now got a nice aperture there, and I've used a piece of acetate that pretty much covers the whole of the strip of card. I think I've cut this card to about 9 centimeters, to the width of the card, and then 9 centimetres deep for this panel. And by having the acetate all the way across, it also means it just gives it a little bit of rigidity, because obviously we're going to want to have this up on foam pads. So I'm happy with my aperture, and now we want to piece the contrasting love into that space, and it already looks great, doesn't it? So let's just apply some glue to the back of this this die cut. I'm going to try and make sure I'm not overzealous with my glue, so again we don't get lots of bleeding. Now, if you were an organised crafter and thought ahead when you're doing a project like this, you could of course have applied some adhesive, an adhesive sheet to the back of your pattern paper and die cut it so that you already had a sticky back when you run it through your die cutting machine. And I know CraftStash sell those because I have them and use them regularly. I haven't done it on this occasion with this particular die, but that's another way of avoiding avoiding kind of leaking glue, or avoiding having to glue up lots of fiddly details. But I don't mind doing it too much, to be honest. And not everything needs to be covered. You just want enough that the main elements are going to stay stuck. You'll soon see if they don't, and it's easy enough just to add a little bit more if you need it. So I think that's us pretty much glued up. This is where I get over enthusiastic with my glue and it goes everywhere. So I'm going to put that bottle down and we can just flip this around. So I mean, you can choose any of the pattern papers in this kit to do this technique, because of course the colorways are going to work beautifully together. I particularly like these marbled papers that are in the collection, because when you kind of cut the designs out of it, you just get these little flashes of gold and the blue, which is going to kind of connect the two designs. Look how fabulous that looks. So I mean, that could be a panel just in its own right without any shaker elements to it at all. I just love the fact that you can piece the whole design back into an aperture in contrasting paper. But I said we were going to do a shaker element, and that's what we shall do. So I've got the other half of the damask sheet of paper that I've got here as a base panel. So I'm going to want to adhere that on top. So you're going to have the patterned paper behind the die, as well as obviously on the main strip. So of course now the job before us, look, there's a bit of a leaf there that needs a bit more glue. I could see it by looking at the other side. Can we do this on camera? In fact, I can put it on the acetate, can't I? I find a lot of my crafting involves thinking aloud. So that leaf's now stuck down. So of course the thing with any shaker aperture that you create, whatever shape it might be, is you want your adhesive, your foam, you want a dimensional adhesive, because obviously you want to create enough of a pocket that you can put a shaker element in, and you want it to be continuous because you don't want your shaker elements to fall out. And so I've got a very large roll of foam tape. Of course there'll be lots of different brands and lots of different options for you here, but I'm not going to try and track this aperture exactly. I'm going to literally sit this whole panel up, because it will be easier to do it that way, and also just to try and ensure that my dimensional adhesive, my foam tape, isn't going to be visible behind the aperture, than me trying to go around every little element of this word. because I don't really have the patience for that, if truth be told. So you can see here, I'm just putting the pieces of foam tape right next to each other so that they're going to create a complete seal. And I'm going to just go around and do this as quickly as I can for you, so it's not too tedious. And we can always check to see if there's any gaps before we go to the next stage. That's maybe slightly too long. Another nice thing about having this acetate all the way along is it's quite forgiving in terms of just moving your foam tape around. If you're doing this directly onto paper, you might risk occasionally tearing or struggling to move your foam tape if it's already got itself fixed. So having an acetate backing all the way across your aperture can sometimes just give you a little bit more playtime. Now, is that going to be visible? I think we'll get away with it. Or shall we do this? Let's do this. Drop it down a little bit. So as long as this corner here is sealed, it'll be fine. Trust me. So here's another piece. And again, if you were eyeballing this or measuring it, you wouldn't necessarily need as many little bits sticking in as I'm doing here. I am just doing this very much by eye, but you could measure your space and make sure your foam tape is going to fit that space before you cut it. So I think, can you see? I think that's looking pretty good in terms of sealing it. And actually, when we think about the shaker elements we're going to use in this particular aperture, they're sequins. So if you're using glitter, obviously that might be one where you need to be extra careful that you're not going to have any tiny spaces for it to slip through. But actually these elements are relatively big, relatively chunky, so they shouldn't cause us too many difficulties. So let's get this, actually let's not stick that down just yet. Let's put some sequins into our main window, otherwise we will have defeated the purpose of this exercise. So they're beautiful, these sequins, aren't they? Kind of, again, a nice rich gold, flowers. I always struggle to guesstimate how many shaker elements to put into my aperture. You want to spread them out nice and flat, because what you don't want is a kind of a pile in the middle, and then you find that when you put your window down it struggles to stick around the edges. So try and keep them out as flat as you can. And this is a relatively large window that we're wanting to have a shaker element in, but equally it's not the largest. Look at that. It's not the largest actual kind of open space, is it? I think that's plenty. In fact, I'm going to take a few off. And you get loads in the kit here, so if you enjoy making this, you'll have scope to make plenty more. Now I'm going to just add a little bit of anti-static to my acetate at the back of the window. I'm never sure if it does make much of a difference, but it's my kind of little attempt to try and avoid the sequins sticking to the acetate too much when they're being shaken around. So there's no harm doing it. I don't find sequins as much of an issue in shaker cards as glitter, because I think it's the finer powder. It does tend to actually then kind of start sticking to the acetate itself, which is cool, which gives a cool look, but I think sequins have got a little bit more weight to them, so I think they do keep moving. Right, so I'm lifting up the backing tape on all of our foam. I'm going to add just a little bit of wet adhesive. Again, this is completely a personal choice. sometimes having a bit of wet adhesive gives you a bit of time to manoeuvre, move things around, and equally when you're looking at wanting to have a nice firm seal for your shaker elements, it just makes sure that if your foam tape is getting a bit tired or it doesn't have the same amount of sticky as it used to, it's still going to do the job for you. Now I have cut this. I'm going to have to just stand on tiptoe so I can see where I'm sticking the sticking the panel. I've cut the paper just slightly smaller than the main panel, so I'm hoping by pressing this down now, I'm not sticking things to my glass mat, I am sticking the top to the bottom, and we just about got away with that, I think, just about. You can see this backing paper is on all of the foam tape, so this should now have sealed itself. And there we go, there's our shaker panel. I think that looks beautiful. So I shall just tidy up slightly and then we will decorate the base of the card for our shaker panel to go on top of. So we've now got our shaker panel that we will be able to put onto our card front. But I want to add a little bit of stencil detail in the background just so that the card isn't a plain white. So I had a little quandary about which of the two fabulous stencils that come in the Papercraft Society box to use, but I think I'm going to go with the peonies for this card because of course they will echo the lovely peony detail around the love sentiment. So it's always good if you can to have that kind of repeating motif on your projects because it just makes it all look nice and cohesive. So I've got my card front panel here, and actually before I add the stencil detail, let's just put a little bit of ink around the edges. It's something I like to do with my stenciling, is to add a bit of ink around the edges and then go tone on tone over the top. I've got two colours here. I've got Tattered Rose and Abandoned Coral, both of them Distress Oxides, and I've got one of my blending brushes. So Tattered Rose is a very soft and gentle pink, and I've got Abandoned Coral out just in case I feel that I need to add a little bit more depth. I'm wanting to try and kind of echo or pick up the lovely soft pinks from our word sentiment, so I don't want anything too strong. I do want to keep this nice and soft and elegant, but also I am hoping you're going to be able to see it on camera too. So I just take my, I don't know what I've got there, just take my blending brush and go around the edges of this card panel. Just takes that white edge off the design, and I really like the way that it looks when the stenciling then kind of almost emerges from the inked edge. So it's definitely one to try if you don't typically do it. I'm just adding a little bit more here. I'm hoping you can see that. So it is, Tattered Rose is a lovely kind of pale colour, it's almost kind of flesh tone. And I think it will work nicely with our sentiment. But we'll add a bit of stenciling, and if I feel it needs a little bit more contrast, we can always get the Abandoned Coral out, which is another nice pink. So I've just laid the design over. I'm not going to worry too much about this central piece because obviously we know that our shaker panel is going to cover the majority of the centre of the card, so we don't need to worry too much about that. And I'm just holding this down, so my blending brush is going to do all the hard work for me, give me a nice smooth blend. Give me a nice smooth blend across the front. You can of course tape your stencil down if you're worried about it moving. I often do tape my stencil down if I'm using something like paste, because obviously you get a little bit more drag with the paste in terms of it pulling over the design. So that can be a nice way of just making sure that your stencil is secure. Let's see whether we're getting enough contrast here. I love that. That's coming through just perfectly. So again, we don't want anything too strong in the background. We do want our shaker panel to be the main focus of our card. And also my ink pad, I think, is starting to feel a bit tired. It's a bit dry. Can be quite nice when stenciling to have an ink pad that's not too juicy, because you've not then got the worry about tapping it off onto your glass mat, in terms of not you're kind of getting anything splotchy or too much ink transferring through your design. But sometimes it just means you have to work that bit harder to get the ink off the pad. And one thing with stenciling just to be aware of as well, it can be quite deceptive. This kind of stencil actually is quite an open one, so it won't really have the same effect, be quite as deceptive as others which have got more solid surface area. And you sometimes aren't aware of how much ink you've already got through your stencil, how kind of clear the stencil design is. So it is always worth periodically lifting the stencil and see what effect you're achieving. So can you see here? I'm hoping that's coming through on camera. It is a beautiful effect, very soft. Let's add just a little bit, a very, very delicate touch of abandoned coral, just to add a little bit more depth around the edges. So I'm just repositioning the stencil over the design. It's fairly easy to do. I'm going to use a smaller brush now. I think I will use a smaller brush, just to make sure I don't cover more of the design than I mean to. I think this abandoned coral is quite juicy. Can you see there how much is coming off on my glass mat? So if you're in doubt, you can always tap off to the side, just to reduce the risk of you getting too much. You see how much stronger that is. Now this is coming across a bit stronger than I really wanted, but don't worry, we can knock this back easily enough. And I'm not going to go all the way down, I just want to create a little bit of depth at the top and bottom. And I won't re-ink from the pad because I've got plenty here on my mat. You see it's much softer at the bottom here where the ink's just starting to dissipate. So this top area here, can you see, it's just a little bit stronger than I was wanting. I'm going to have to add some ink down the edge as well now. So let me go back in. This is what I typically do if I feel I've got a bit more ink transferred than I wanted to, is I will then, to get that to blend a bit more kind of softly into my card base, is I'll go back in with the original colour, the Tattered Rose, and that will just, because the oxides particularly are a bit opaque, it'll just take some of that starkness off the stenciling. I won't worry too much about it at the bottom because we've already got a bit of a softer blend. Can you see? I like that actually. Now what I'm going to just do down the edge here is use a bit of the abandoned coral just to soften that colour, so the stencil doesn't end too abruptly. So these are all ways of just kind of integrating your stencil into the design. There we go. Really quick and easy to do. Let's say just gives it a nice soft edge. So let's see how that now looks with the shaker panel over the top. That looks good, doesn't it? Right, let's get this stuck down and we can finish this card. Let me just wipe away the ink from our glass mat. This is very simple. I've got, I think it's a 6x6 card, and I'm going to use it as a square card. I'm going to use it as a top folder though, and I've cut my main panel so it's slightly smaller than that 6x6. So we've got a nice white edge around the outside. Bit of glue. And we can get that stuck down. Then the really fun element of the card will be that shaker panel we started with at the beginning, which is still shaking, so that's a good sign. A decent amount of glue on that back. And I'll position that across the middle. My card front, so you can see that central area that was we'd left quite pale with our stenciling is completely covered, and actually we've got a nice glow going around the that die cut panel. And there we have it. I'll take some photos of our shaker card, but hopefully you like that, the colour combo. And the way that we've got the peonies mapping or mirroring the design in the centre. Now I'm going to turn the camera off and make a second quick card using the negatives, the offcuts from this project, just to show how you can make use of everything that you cut out to create this shaker card. Thanks very much. So, having created our fabulous shaker card, which I'm still enjoying shaking, all I did, as I was saying previously, was use the die cut that we'd taken out of that dark blue Baroque pattern paper. I've attached it to a strip of vellum, and I've used then the letters that came out of the die cut that's on the top here to paper piece in and create a bit of contrast, a bit of kind of impact on our sentiment. Now I've attached this on vellum and wrapped it around the pattern paper, again from the kit, because that pattern paper is quite busy, it's quite a strong pattern, and therefore having your sentiment on a strip of vellum over the top is just going to give you a little bit more definition and a separation between your focal point and your background. And I trimmed the pattern paper down and made it slightly smaller than the solid coloured card that comes in the paper kit and coordinates perfectly. And there you go, really quick and simple to do. It just took a few minutes to do. So having completed this card, I had the elements to hand to be able to make a quick second card that I think looks equally lovely. So there are your two cards for our demos today.